Some places don't rely on what happened there, but on how people feel when they arrive. Across the United Kingdom, there are locations that remain open, accessible, and in some cases even well known. On the surface, there is nothing to suggest that anything is out of the ordinary, and yet, over time, certain patterns begin to appear. Visitors describing the same uneasy atmosphere, subtle details that don't quite match expectations, and moments that are difficult to explain, not because they are dramatic, but because they feel unexpectedly real. These aren't isolated stories, they are repeated experiences, shared by people who had no reason to expect anything unusual before they arrived. And while each location has its own history, its own structure, and its own context, there's a common question that continues to come up. Why do some places feel different, even when nothing obvious is happening? There are places history tried to forget, and stories that were never meant to be told. But the deeper you look, the harder they are to ignore. This is Behind Truths. The tunnels beneath the city, where people begin to feel disoriented without explanation. Beneath the surface of southeast London lies a network of man-made tunnels stretching 4 miles, a labyrinth carved into the ground over centuries, known today as the Chislehurst Caves. Originally created through chalk mining, the tunnels were later used for various purposes, including storage and, during the Second World War, as air raid shelters. From a historical perspective, the site is well understood, but for many visitors, the experience of being inside the caves doesn't always match expectations. The layout is extensive, long corridors branch into multiple directions, often appearing similar, making orientation difficult without guidance. Even with modern lighting in certain areas, there are sections where visibility drops quickly, and the sense of distance becomes unclear. It's in these conditions that some visitors begin to notice something unusual, not a specific event, but a gradual shift in perception. Reports describe a sense of disorientation that goes beyond simply getting lost, a feeling of being further from the exit than expected. Moments where sound behaves differently, footsteps echoing in ways that make it difficult to judge direction, or voices seeming closer or further away than they should be. In some cases, visitors have described the impression of movement in peripheral vision, something not directly seen, but enough to create uncertainty. These experiences are not consistent for everyone. Many people walk through the caves without reporting anything unusual, but the repetition of similar descriptions has kept the location in ongoing discussion. Possible explanations have been suggested. The structure itself can affect acoustics, altering how sound travels and reflects. The lack of natural reference points can impact spatial awareness, and the confined environment may influence perception over time, especially in low light conditions. All of these factors are grounded in how humans respond to enclosed spaces, but for some, they don't fully account for the intensity of the experience described, because when multiple individuals, at different times, report a similar sense of disorientation, it raises a question: is it purely the environment, or something about the way the space is experienced? The Chislehurst Caves remain open and continue to attract visitors, but not everyone leaves with the same impression they had when they entered. And if an underground environment can alter perception in that way, the next location takes that unease above ground into a structure where history, architecture, and repeated accounts seem to intersect. A place where what people report isn't just a feeling, but something they believe they've seen. The ruins, where visitors report seeing something that isn't always there when they look again. Set within a wooded valley in Devon, the ruins of Berry Pomeroy Castle stand partially hidden by the surrounding landscape. At first glance, it appears like many historic sites across the UK: weathered stone walls, collapsed sections, and remnants of a structure that once held significance centuries ago. Its history is documented, Construction began in the late 15th century, with later expansions adding to its complexity. Over time, the castle fell into decline, eventually becoming the ruin that remains today. But alongside that history, another layer has developed, one shaped not by records, but by repeated accounts from visitors. Unlike locations where reports are tied to a single story, Berry Pomeroy Castle is often associated with a pattern. People arriving without expectation, walking through the ruins, and noticing something that doesn't quite align with the environment. In some cases, it's described as a presence, not clearly seen, but felt, particularly in enclosed sections of the structure, where the remaining walls create narrow passages and limited visibility. In other instances, visitors have reported seeing figures at a distance, shapes that appear briefly within doorways or along upper sections of the ruins, only to no longer be visible when approached or observed more directly. These reports vary in detail. Some are subtle, others more specific, but they tend to share a similar structure: a moment of certainty, followed by uncertainty when the detail cannot be confirmed. As with many sites of this kind, explanations have been proposed. Lighting conditions can change rapidly in wooded areas, especially when shadows shift across uneven surfaces. The layout of the ruins can obscure lines of sight, creating visual effects that appear and disappear depending on position, and the historical context itself may influence perception, shaping how the environment is interpreted. All of these factors provide reasonable context, but they don't entirely explain why similar experiences continue to be reported. Because when people independently describe noticing something and then losing it just as quickly, it leaves a gap between what was perceived and what can be verified. Berry Pomeroy Castle remains accessible and continues to be visited for its history and setting. But for some, the memory of the visit isn't just about the structure. It's about a moment that felt real and then couldn't be confirmed. And if a place like that can create such a consistent pattern of experience, the next location expands beyond a structure entirely, because this time the setting is open, exposed, and far less confined. And yet, the reports connected to it have continued for centuries. The hill where history never fully faded, and experiences still don't feel explained. Rising above the surrounding countryside in Lancashire, Pendle Hill is a landscape defined as much by its history as by its presence. It's widely known for its connection to the witch trials of 1612, one of the most documented and discussed events of its kind in England. The stories tied to that period have been preserved, studied, and retold for generations. But what makes Pendle Hill stand out isn't only what happened there centuries ago. It's what people continue to report even now. Unlike enclosed locations, the hill is open, wide, exposed, and visible from a distance. There are no walls, no confined corridors, no structures influencing how space is experienced. And yet, certain accounts follow a pattern. Visitors describe moments where the environment seems to shift subtly. A sudden drop in sound, where the usual background noise, wind, distant movement feels noticeably reduced. A sense of isolation that appears more intense than expected, even when others are nearby. Some report seeing movement at a distance, figures or shapes along the slopes that are difficult to clearly identify, not close enough to confirm, but distinct enough to be noticed. Others describe a feeling of being watched, without any clear source. As with previous cases, these experiences are not universal. Many people visit Pendle Hill without noticing anything unusual, but the consistency of certain descriptions has kept the location in ongoing discussion. Possible explanations exist. The elevation and exposure of the hill can affect how sound travels, sometimes reducing or redirecting it, where the conditions can shift quickly, altering visibility and atmosphere within minutes. And the historical context of the location may influence how visitors interpret what they perceive. These factors provide logical context, but they don't fully explain why similar experiences continue to be reported, often in comparable ways, because when a location has no physical constraints and still creates a consistent sense of unease, it raises a different kind of question. Is the experience shaped entirely by the environment, or by something less visible, but equally present? Pendle Hill remains open and continues to attract visitors drawn by its history and landscape. But for some, the experience extends beyond what can be seen, and if an open landscape can create that kind of response, the final location brings everything back into a confined space once again. But this time, the setting is not just historic, it's abandoned, and the experiences reported there tend to feel more direct and far more difficult to ignore. The abandoned building where silence feels different, and some visitors choose not to stay. Standing on the outskirts of Denbigh in North Wales, the former asylum is a structure that immediately stands apart from its surroundings. Large, imposing, and now left to decay, it was once one of the most significant psychiatric hospitals in the region, operating for over a century before closing in the late 20th century. Since then, it has remained largely unused. Time has altered the building. Windows are broken, corridors exposed, and sections of the structure have deteriorated. But despite its condition, the layout remains intact enough for people to move through parts of it. And over the years, some have, unlike locations that are openly maintained for visitors. This is a place people typically enter out of curiosity. There are no guided paths, no controlled environment, just long corridors, empty rooms, and a structure that still carries the weight of its past. It's within this setting that certain reports begin to emerge. Visitors often describe a change in atmosphere once inside, not something immediate, but something that builds gradually, a sense of unease that becomes more noticeable the longer they remain. In some cases, people report hearing sounds, subtle at first, distant echoes, faint movements, or noises that are difficult to place within an empty building. Others describe moments where they feel as though they are not alone, despite there being no clear indication of anyone else present. As with the previous locations, these experiences are not universal. Some enter and leave without noticing anything unusual, but those who do report something tend to describe a similar pattern, not a single event, but a growing awareness that something doesn't feel right. There are practical explanations. The structure itself can amplify and distort sound. Wind passing through broken sections of the building can create unexpected noises, and the visual state of the environment, combined with its history, can influence perception. These factors are well understood, but for some, they don't fully explain the experience, because when multiple people describe a similar progression from normality to unease within the same environment, it suggests that something about the space affects perception in a consistent way. Denbigh Asylum remains what it is today, an abandoned structure with a documented past. But for those who have entered it, the memory often isn't just visual. It's something less defined, a feeling that built over time and stayed even after they left. Across this video, we've explored 4 locations connected to the United Kingdom, each one associated not just with history, but with repeated experiences reported by those who have visited. An underground network where perception begins to shift without warning, a ruined castle where brief moments are seen, but not confirmed, an open landscape where the atmosphere itself feels altered, and an abandoned building where the sense of unease seems to grow the longer you stay. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these places do you think can be explained by environment and perception alone? And which one feels like something more? And if you've ever visited a place that felt different, not because of what you saw, but because of how it felt, what do you think causes that? Let me know in the comments. Because sometimes, the most difficult experiences to explain are the ones that don't leave clear evidence behind.